It's Red Eye Radio. Gary McNamara and Eric Harley talk about everything from politics to social issues and news of the day. Whether you're up late or you're just starting your day, welcome to the show. From the Uniden America Studios, this is Red Eye Radio.
All across America. We are Red Eye Radio. He is Eric Harley, and I'm Gary McNamara. Thank you for being here.
Thank you.
All right, I'm trying to find the one. I think it's we didn't get to the Supreme Court yet, and the whole the tariff thing yesterday. I believe this. I've got so much audio that I got on. I was in and out listening to it yesterday. I was so busy yesterday, and it was driving me crazy. Now, when we talk about the tariffs, we're not talking about whether you're for them or against them, what Trump's purpose was. We're talking about strictly the legal arguments and the constitutional issues here.
Yeah.
And one of the things that we brought up yesterday, because it was one of the major parts of discussion, and you and I, it was funny because you and I were talking about it. So, of course, what happened was all the Supreme Court justices, before they started it, were listening to our podcast when they woke up.
Of course.
And said, okay, this is the most important question.
Yeah.
But one of the things that was coming up was the debate, and it was on what we had said about tariffs and what you could do. And I don't know whether you or I said it. I know it's been in my mind, so I might have said it. But I said, when you look at the IEEPA and when you look at the law in general and the Constitution, the president can basically say to any country, we're going to have import quotas. We're not going to take 20% of what you're sending us because you're involved in unfair trading practices.
Right.
But what he can't do is say we're going to put a tariff on you, because at that point and that behavior, you put a tax on American companies.
Right. Chief Justice Roberts yesterday called it a foreign-facing tax. And I thought, okay, that's an interesting way to put it, but it's still a tax on the importer.
Yeah, it's a tax on the importer. So that debate's gone.
Right.
That debate legally disappeared yesterday.
Right.
Even the Trump administration is not using that. The Trump administration Trump may say it, but he hasn't said it recently. Has he said it recently? Have you heard him say recently that the foreign countries pay it? I haven't. And we had said he shouldn't have said it from the beginning, because if you know anything about tariffs, you know that the importer pays for it.
Right.
We had arguments with our listeners. We're like, stop.
Well, Scott Bessent has said it multiple times.
Scott Bessent said it over and over again. And so the entire thing in the Constitution where it says that Congress is only Congress can tax and implement duties and imposts, those are tariffs. That's what that means. Mm-hmm. And so the question came up, and I'm not sure. I think it's in this conversation with Sotomayor. And the reason I'm playing it is because Sotomayor was actually talking about the law.
Right.
It wasn't. It wasn't. They were talking legal stuff, not personal opinions.
Exactly.
And both of them, back and forth, whatever.
Right, yeah. What
they believed the law was. But the point was a couple of points that were brought up. The point where then what you're saying is and this might have been to the other attorney. I can't remember the attorney for the plaintiffs, which was, are you saying that the president can shut down trade completely with the country and he can't put a 1% tariff on them? Now, using an extreme there, because there's no 1% tariff, and there is no absolute shutdown of it. And that caught my attention immediately because we were talking about it. I went, yeah, because one of those behaviors taxes an American company, which is taxing an American.
Right.
You're taxing an American company, and therefore that's what makes it. So that was one of the things out there. One of the other things that came up was the hypothetical about climate emergency, where they seem to be, the Solicitor General seemed to be suggesting that Biden could have said, there's a climate chaos. It's an emergency. The United States is being destroyed because of global warming. And therefore, we need to slow down the economy. So we're going to tax companies, or we're going to put a tariff or whatever, or tax companies, the global warming tax, the carbon tax,
right,
in order to save the country. Are you saying they can do that under the Commerce Clause or whatever? Or what? And that was a fascinating conversation back and forth. But let's just play a number of audio cuts here from the hearings yesterday. This is Sotomayor with D. John Sauer, the U.S. Solicitor General, taking the side of the Trump administration.
The court held that he's subject to the widest latitude of judicial interpretation, that he received the strongest presumption of validity.
I just don't understand this argument. It's not an article. It's a congressional power, not a presidential power to tax. And you want to say tariffs are not taxes, but that's exactly what they are. They're generating money from American citizens, revenue. And you say it's incidental to the regulatory purpose. But I don't see how a quota is equivalent to revenue raising. A quota sets a limit to what you can import in, but it doesn't generate revenue. I don't understand this argument, that it's equivalent, or that foreign powers or even an emergency can do away with the major questions doctrine. Didn't we in the Biden case recently say an emergency can't make clear what's ambiguous?
As to that point, I believe...
oh, by the way, when she brought that up, I know that's a Chevron decision, is it not?
Yeah, it sounded like
when she just said that, which I believe she voted against.
Right.
But let's continue. Here we go.
The court has never applied the major questions doctrine in the foreign policy context.
But we have,
emergency context, not foreign policy context.
We have never applied it to foreign affairs, but this is a tariff. This is a tax.
It is a, if I may, it's a foreign-facing regulation of foreign commerce. That's a regulatory tariff distinct from a tax.
So Biden could have declared a national emergency and global warming and then gotten his student forgiveness to not be a major questions doctrine?
I don't think he could have gotten student loan forgiveness.
Why?
But
It's global. It's foreign-facing. We need all of these things to face to tax fossil fuel or to do something else. That's all Biden would have had to do with any of his programs?
Let me put it this way, if I may.
Is just declare some foreign-facing purpose?
If I may, maybe I can articulate it this way. The power to impose tariffs is a core application of the power to regulate foreign commerce, which is what the phrase regulate importation in IEPA naturally evokes.
Why
not the power to tax.
Could you tell me why it is that when Congress intended to permit a president to regulate by imposing tariffs, it's always used tariff and regulate? I have about 16 laws in the past that when Congress intended regulate to mean taxing, that it used taxes simultaneously. But it didn't here.
Respectfully, this court came to the opposite conclusion, if I may, in Algonquin, where the phrase was not
well,
duties.
But that was, we did something in Algonquin. It was in the duties section, unlike here. It was paired with questions about decreasing tariffs and increasing tariffs. So it's a very different statute than.
Yeah, I don't want to get into the because it gets quite complicated to get into all the other other cases there. But I thought it was interesting with the now. Remember, what he said was, well, he probably couldn't have done the student loan forgiveness. That probably was the right decision, but he didn't mention the climate emergency portion of it,
right?
Which I thought was really, really interesting. But she shouldn't have brought up the student loan forgiveness because it's not the same thing.
Right.
The hypothetical client student loan forgiveness wasn't about directly taxing. There might have been, indirect taxes to pay for it, but the student loan forgiveness itself was not the taxation part of it. But if you have a hypothetical climate emergency saying that the planet's being destroyed, the United States being destroyed, therefore we need to slow down the economy, and so we need to have a carbon tax and tax companies to do that, I think he was trying to stay away from that one.
Yeah.
I'm speculating here, but that's what it seemed. Let's go now to some of the more conservative justices. This is Neil Gorsuch here, again, talking with the U.S. Solicitor General.
Through those words, I think you're saying that no, the president doesn't have inherent authority over tariffs in peacetime.
Absolutely. We do not assert that. We say that Congress can delegate that to him, and when Congress does so, as it does when it uses the phrase regulate importation.
I follow all of that. Okay. You emphasize that Congress can always take back its powers. You mentioned that a couple of times. But don't we have a serious retrieval problem here? Because once Congress delegates by a bare majority and the president signs it, and of course every president will sign a law that gives him more authority, Congress can't take that back without a supermajority. And even then, it's going to be veto proof. What president's ever going to give that power back? Pretty rare president.
That was a really interesting point.
Well, and I thought to myself, even beyond that, would a party also be inclined, again, I'm always thinking of the opposition, the Democrats, to give their president, if they had power, give their president more authority and let him run with it politically on whatever it is when it doesn't apply? Because there's a reason that you would need a constitutional amendment. There's a reason why it should be hard to change that authority. Because if you think about that, then it's basically, all right, we could, for whatever reason, as a party, just hand it over. And then he points out, well, wait a minute, without a supermajority in the future, they couldn't retrieve that power.
Right.
Because the veto pin holds that power again without that supermajority being in place.
Now, you might be able to make the case that if the law was, if you passed it with 51 votes, that 51 votes could take it back. But the other point is, and we'll play this coming up following the break here, because it's the audio cut is a couple of minutes long. I want to play it. But the fact is, Gorsuch then asked him, he said, can Congress then give up their right to declare war and give it to the president? And that's the whole point. They can't.
Right.
Because if Congress passes a law stating that the president can tax, the Constitution says they can't. The Constitution supersedes any law that Congress passes. That's the whole thing with the War Powers Act,
right?
As we talked about, where Congress says, okay, back in the 70s, we're going to have a War Powers Act, and we're going to stipulate to the president what he can do and what he can't do. And even though presidents have followed the War Powers Act, every single administration has told Congress, we're not legally bound to it. Congress cannot dictate through a law what the constitutional role of the president is in the War Powers Act. Congress can also not, by a law, supersede what the Constitution delegates, what responsibility Congress has. Congress can't give up their constitutional duty and transfer it to the president unless There was a constitutional amendment
Exactly.
that stated that they could do that,
Right.
and that was a weak part of it. But we'll have that because I actually went through the whole War Powers Act where Gorsuch said, but you do say that's unreviewable, that they could do that. Have you backed off? And Sauer said, maybe that's fair to say. To me, that was one of the bigger burns that they got.
Well, I think it was too. And the separation of powers is everything here. I mean, that's what we're talking about. And Congress can't just do that. You need a constitutional amendment if you wanted to change that.
We are Red Eye Radio.
Brought to you by FPPF, Fuel Power Max.
The IFTA tax program redistributes tax revenue to states based on your actual miles run. Thus, the truly cheapest fuel can only be found if you subtract federal and state taxes and state surcharges from the pump price to compare. The strategy means that you buy without regard for whether you are paying more at the pump in taxes. IFTA also considers state surcharges, which complicates the fuel buying strategy. Indiana, Kentucky, and Virginia have per gallon surcharges. Connecticut, Kentucky, New Mexico, New York, and Oregon have per mile surcharges. While some owner-operators buy only enough fuel to get through surcharge states, this practice can backfire, depending on the actual cost of the fuel in each state. When comparing fuel prices, always remember, pump pride minus taxes equals the real fuel cost. Owner-Operator Business 101 is provided by Overdrive's Partners in Business program. Go to overdriveonline.com to the Partners in Business section of the website for more detail on this and many other topics.
Brought to you by Shell Rotella. With advanced synthetic technology is designed to help keep your rig running with more mileage and less maintenance.
Get in touch with Red Eye Radio, toll free at 866-90-RED-EYE.
We are Red Eye Radio. He's Eric Harley, and I'm Gary McNamara. Welcome and good morning. Thanks so much for being here this morning. Let's get to, I want to play one more audio cut. This is Justice Gorsuch talking with U.S. Solicitor General Sauer. And we'll play it and then discuss it afterwards. Here we go.
All right.
General, just a few questions following up on the major questions discussions you've had. You say that we shouldn't be so concerned in the area of foreign affairs because of the president's inherent powers. That's the gist of it, as I understand it, why we should disregard both major questions and non-delegation. So could Congress delegate to the president the power to regulate commerce with foreign nations as he sees fit, to lay and collect duties as he sees fit?
We don't assert that here. That would be a much harder case now in 1790.
Isn't that the logic of your view, though?
I don't think so, because we're dealing with a statute that was a carefully crafted compromise. It does have all the limitations that I just talked about.
But you're saying we shouldn't be concerned with. I want to explain to me how you draw the line, because you say we shouldn't be concerned because this is foreign affairs and the president has inherent authority, and so delegation off the books, more or less. And if that's true, what would prohibit Congress from just abdicating all responsibility to regulate foreign commerce, for that matter, declare war, to the president?
We don't contend that he could do that. If it did,
why not?
Well, because we're dealing with a statute, again, that has a whole series
I'm not
of
asking about the statute,
limitations.
General. I'm not asking about the statute. I'm asking for your theory of the Constitution and why the major questions and non-delegation, what bite it would have in that case.
Yes. I would say by then you would move from the area where there's enormous deference to the president, actually both the political branches, where here there's inherent authority, and piled on top of that there's a broad delegation.
You're saying there's inherent authority in foreign affairs, all foreign affairs. So regulate commerce, duties and tariffs and war. It's inherent authority all the way down, you say. Fine. Congress decides tomorrow, well, we're tired of this legislating business. We're just going to hand it all off to the president. What would stop Congress from doing that?
That would be different than a situation where there are metes and bounds, so to speak.
We'll get to more of that coming up here.
They live the life. They walk the walk. Gary McNamara and Eric Harley. Red Eye Radio.
I'm not doing any walking.
That's what walk the walk.
I'm not walking anywhere. What's the big guy saying? What's he trying to say?
No, I heard is they walk the walk.
They
I'm
walk
like,
the walk.
okay.
I'm not walking.
Is this
No.
over? Is that over the top hyperbole?
It's not in my job description. Talk. We talk the talk, and that's it.
Yeah, we talk.
End of story. I'm not walking any walk.
We talk. The hell with walk.
I'm not. If I wanted to walk, are you kidding me? What is this, aerobics class?
All right, I want to finish the audio cut of Justice Gorsuch talking to the U.S. Solicitor General, and this is a separation of powers case, is what it is. And it's interesting because you had said to me, who said it? It was Scalia. You were right. Scalia said it a long time ago. He said, "What's the most important part of the Constitution?" And the average person would say the Bill of Rights. That's absolutely wrong. It's the separation of powers.
Yep.
Separation of powers, which, again, was put into the Constitution, which is why it's such a beautiful Constitution, that you don't want power to accumulate for any length of time in one portion of the government.
Right.
Be it the judicial, be it the legislative or the executive branch. It's that push and pull that the founding fathers very intelligently put in, because that's when you have the problem. That's when countries go down.
Right.
And so this whole issue is a separation of powers issue.
Yes.
This isn't we're not talking the economic issues here at the moment. We're not talking the political issues here at the moment. This is strictly the constitutional issues of the tariffs and its relation to the separation of powers. And let's get back to, there's a short portion left in the back and forth between Gorsuch and U.S. Solicitor General Sauer.
Just going to hand it all off to the president. What would stop Congress from doing that?
That would be different than a situation where there are metes and bounds, so to speak. It would be a wholesale application.
You say we are not here to judge metes and bounds when the foreign affairs. That's what I'm struggling with. You'd have to have some test. And if it isn't the intelligible principle test or something more with more bite than that, you're saying it's something less. Well, what is that less?
I think what the court has said in its opinions is just that it applies with much less force, more limited application in this context. So perhaps the right to approach it is a very, very deferential application of the intelligible principle test, that sort of wholesale application of...
All right, so now you're admitting that there is some non-delegation principle at play here, and therefore major questions as well. Is that right?
Very limited, very, very deferential. Okay. Limited is what, and again, the phrase that Justice Jackson uses, it just does not apply. At least
I know, but that's where you started off, and now you've retreated from that, as I understand it.
Well, I think we would, as our frontline position, assert the stronger position, but if the court doesn't accept it, then if there is a highly deferential...
Can you give me a reason to accept it, though? That's what I'm struggling and waiting for. What's the reason to accept the notion that Congress can hand off the power to declare war to the president?
Well, we don't contend that. Again, that would
well,
be...
you do. You say it's unreviewable. There's no manageable standard, nothing to be done. And now you're... I think you... tell me if I'm wrong. You backed off that position.
Maybe that's fair to say.
Okay.
That was one of the biggest burns.
That was a crash
that
right
was
there. That's what you just heard.
And so what it comes down to, and I was trying... I know what I believe. I don't believe, I believe, as I said yesterday, that the Constitution gives the president the absolute power to say, we're shutting down trade with this particular country.
Right.
There's no more trade.
Right.
Or we're going to cut imports. We're going to have import quotas that he can do that in an emergency that affects the United States. How you determine that emergency, I don't know. And it looks like they're not at the point of determining the emergency. This is what we sort of believed it would probably get to.
Right.
We're never sure, but a separation of powers.
Right.
Which is, no, we're not saying that the president, when it comes to foreign affairs, can't do that. What he can't do is initiate something that taxes the American public.
Yeah, right. And I think,
is it that simple?
Yeah, I really think that's it. And because, again, if you focus on and stay on the foundation of separation of powers, then you understand what can and can't be done. And there's nothing statutory that can change the separation of powers. There isn't.
Because
that's That was the crash and burn right there that you just heard. Because Gorsuch rightly pushed him on it and said, well, wait a minute. Well, where would you draw that line?
Right.
Because without changing the Constitution, which is next to impossible to do for a reason, that's not going to happen. And that's, again, why those limits, those checks and balances are there. And you think about, I don't know, again, if you wanted to, if the president wanted to, look, we're going to shut down all imports. Well, let's just use Iran. Let's say we were importing oil from Iran, and then they started their behavior just now.
Presidents have done that.
Exactly. Yeah. We're not buying any more from you. China, we're not buying any more from you. That is within the authority.
But it was such a big legal burn, and apparently it was Justice Jackson he was getting into that discussion with, which and that's why Gorsuch said, "What's the reason to accept the notion that Congress can hand off the power to declare war to the president?" And the Solicitor General said, I'll repeat it again, we don't contend that. You do. You say it's unreviewable. You backed off in that position. Sauer, maybe that's fair to say. Well, you just blew your entire case there.
If you backed off from that position, then you really don't have a position. You just took your foundation out the door.
On these legal cases, I always look for, I know what I think it says. I always look for, where is the argument against where I believe the Constitution stands?
Where's the hole in my argument?
Where's the hole in my argument?
Yep.
Because I want to understand, I always want to understand what the Constitution is.
Right.
But this gets to something, this isn't really, you get into a lot of technical decisions. For example, I'll be absolutely blunt, because majority of the time I'm lying to you. The one thing that I still can't wrap my head around, ever, is the discussion on what is a monopoly legally.
Oh, yeah, I'm with you on that.
I know morally what it is, but when they get into the technical stuff of it, they lose me. They always, I just frankly, but the separation of powers, Congress cannot say, we don't want to do this anymore. We're going to let the president do it.
Right.
They can't do that.
Right.
And it can't work where Congress also creates a law to limit what the president's authority is, which is why we talked about the War Powers Act.
Right.
Which is why the president even has great deference with the illegal fentanyl and blowing up those boats coming in.
I would use spending. I would add spending. Well, why not just hand over the spending, the purse strings, to the executive branch?
Well, I mean, but that, that actually sort of is brought up, but it really, you can't make that case. But the president putting out a budget every year.
Right.
That's been discussed.
Yeah, the so-called skinny budget.
Yeah, there's always been this discussion.
Which is always really fat.
The White House puts out their budget today. There's nothing in the There's nothing in the Constitution about the president putting out a budget. Right. Doesn't exist.
Right.
Now, the president can do it. It's more of a suggestion, but
it's agenda-driven.
Right.
I won't even say goals, because it's quite often not realistic. Although, again, if your party has the House and you've got the votes in the Senate, then maybe some of that can get done. But it's always pie in the sky stuff.
Right. But like on the War Powers Act, where Congress tries to limit the president when it comes to that, yeah, but that was a big burn. From what I get, and tell me whether I'm on the right path here, the Sauer was trying to make the point that when it comes to foreign things, foreign emergencies, the United States with another country, the president almost has unlimited power in an emergency. And I agree with that point. With that point.
Right.
But nowhere does it say he can tax American companies to stop that emergency. It's the taxing, it's the duties, it's the impost, which is clearly written in the Constitution,
right,
that the president doesn't have the power to do, and Congress doesn't have the power to make a law to give him that power.
Right.
It just doesn't exist in the Constitution.
Right.
And this isn't a political or economic argument. It's a constitutional argument. And to me, it's so crystal clear. I thought it was a horrible day for the administration yesterday on this.
Well, you and I wondered what the hearing would be like, what the arguments would be like, because where are you going to go? Which basis are you going to use? Because we've heard a handful of them since the beginning of this whole thing, from the administration, from the president.
Now, what I wonder, because you never know what the Supreme Court's going to do, my mind, because I'm always looking for the opposite argument on a constitutional issue than what my argument is. But if they come and they back the president and say he's right, I am absolutely fascinated to see how they view the separation of powers differently than I do.
If you mean if SCOTUS votes in
SCOTUS
favor
votes, yeah.
of the
what
president.
would be the reasoning? Do they bypass? Do they not even bring up the separation of powers? Do they use something else? How do they get there?
Judging on the back and forth yesterday, well, I would just say I can't see how they would get there.
Yeah.
I don't know what the decision will be, but it doesn't sound like anybody made a clear case. I think it was Alito was the only one. Let's see here. Here's from Amy Howe, SCOTUSblog.com. She's great, by the way. Justice Samuel Alito also seemed sympathetic to the administration's arguments, telling Katyal that statutes that confer real emergency powers are often phrased quite broadly, but it was not clear whether Alito had 4 other votes on his side. Well, but I don't expect them to vote on and define emergencies.
But the statute doesn't supersede the Constitution.
Right, exactly.
A law from Congress does not supersede. Now, if they, as we said earlier, if they made a constitutional amendment, could you imagine that one?
Ooh.
Let's change the separation of powers.
I was telling you during the break that would be
and have
the
Congress
worst ever.
And have Congress give up
that would be the worst ever.
Their authority under the Constitution and give it to the executive branch. Well, then,
I mean that's the basis of it all.
Then I'm going to Canada.
Yeah. Well, we'll just become Canada. We'll become their 51st state. They don't have states. Whatever.
Well,
we'll become their new province.
Their prime minister isn't as powerful as
the province of the United States, the southern province. Oh. Yeah. Look, no offense to Canadians. It's your leadership we're talking about.
We'll become Texberta.
Exactly. But that's the thing, too. It's, again, when I was looking through yesterday, because I had to go back to the notes because I had a meeting scheduled at this time, which was kind of frustrating because during the meeting I was a bit distracted. But you and I have been wondering what the arguments would be. All right. When we learned they were going to hear the case, what will it sound like? That crash and burn you just heard was bad.
That was as bad as I've ever heard
in front of SCOTUS?
In front of a SCOTUS.
That's
where you have to back off on the position that you just held on something that is so obviously obvious in the separation of powers in the United States.
Exactly.
In the Constitution.
It was bad.
Obviously obvious. Did I just say that? Yes.
Obviously.
We are Red Eye Radio.
Coming up, more with Gary McNamara and Eric Harley. It's Red Eye Radio.
We are Red Eye Radio. He's Eric Harley, and I'm Gary McNamara. Oh, my gosh. Bernie Sanders crashes Schumer's news conference yesterday.
For the first time ever, Bernie didn't give his podium up to somebody. He came in and commandeered someone else's, not just someone else's, the party's leadership in the Senate.
And why?
And then trashes the party's leadership in the Senate.
For not supporting a communist.
A bunch of oligarchs. I mean, he just got up there and railed on. I'm like, here we go. He thinks this is going to happen. Bernie thinks this is all going to work, and the communists are all going to take over, and everything's going to be fine. Wow. That's confidence.
This is Red Eye Radio on Westwood One.